The convergence station hung in the darkness of space like a massive jewel, its lights reflecting off the hull of the human transport ship as it approached the docking bay. Commander Sarah Chun stood at the viewport, watching the enormous structure grow larger with each passing moment. Her face calm, but her mind racing with thoughts of what awaited them inside. Behind her stood 6 Marines in full combat armor, their powered suits humming softly with contained energy. Each suit was a marvel of human engineering, thick plates of composite armor, layered over hydraulic systems, backup mechanical joints underneath electronic controls, and enough redundant systems to make any engineer proud. The suits made the Marines look like walking tanks, broad and imposing, painted in the dark gray and blue of the Earth Defense Force. First time meeting aliens, and we're dressed for war, Sergeant Marcus Webb said through his helmet's external speakers, his voice carrying a hint of dark humor. He was the lead Marine, a veteran of the Mars Rebellion and the Europa Ice Wars, and he trusted his armor more than he trusted most people. Chun turned to face him, her diplomatic uniform crisp and clean against the military backdrop. "We're dressed for survival, Sergeant," she replied, her tone professional but not unkind. "We don't know what's waiting for us out there." The docking procedure took another 20 minutes, and then they were through the airlock and into the station proper. The sight that greeted them was beyond anything they had imagined. The main concourse stretched for what seemed like kilometers, filled with beings from dozens of worlds. Some walked on 2 legs like humans, others on 4 or 6 or more. Some flew through the air on wings or anti-gravity platforms. The air smelled strange, a mixture of scents both familiar and utterly alien. What struck Chun immediately was how lightly protected everyone seemed. Most aliens wore simple clothing or light exosuits that looked more like fashion statements than protective gear. Some had visible energy shields shimmering around them like soap bubbles, faint distortions in the air that marked advanced technology at work. Nowhere did she see anything resembling heavy armor except on her own Marines. The human delegation made their way through the crowds toward the main assembly hall, and Chun noticed the stairs. At first, she thought it was simple curiosity. Humans were newcomers here, after all, but then she started to hear the whispers. And they weren't all friendly. "Look at their armor," one alien said to another, its voice automatically translated by the station systems. "So primitive, so heavy, they walk like cargo haulers." Another replied with what sounded like laughter. Webb's jaw tightened inside his helmet, but he kept marching. The other Marines followed suit, their footsteps heavy and rhythmic on the station's deck. They had trained for this, trained to represent humanity with dignity and strength. And they wouldn't let mockery break their discipline. The assembly hall was enormous. A circular chamber with seats arranged in rising tiers around a central platform. Already it was filling with delegates from the various coalition species, and the human delegation was directed to seats in one of the lower tiers. As they took their positions, Chun noticed a group of insectoid aliens in the seats directly across from them. Their chitinous bodies gleaming under the lights, one of them rose and approached, moving with a grace that seemed impossible for something so large. It stood nearly 3 meters tall, with 4 arms and a head that reminded Chun of a praying mantis. Its translator crackled to life as it spoke. "I am Ambassador Thexilor of the Vacrine Empire," it announced, its voice carrying across the space between them. "You must be the human delegation. We have heard much about your species." Chun stood and offered a diplomatic bow. "Commander Sarah Chun, representing the United Earth Government," she replied. "We are honored to be here." Thexilor as mandibles clicked in what might have been amusement. "Honored, yes," it said, its multifaceted eyes fixed on the Marines behind Chun. "Tell me, Commander, why do your warriors wear such antiquated protection? Physical armor went out of fashion in the Coalition 3,000 years ago. We have energy shields now, far more efficient and effective. The question was clearly meant to embarrass, and Chun felt the attention of nearby delegates turning toward them. She kept her expression neutral, diplomatic training taking over. "We find that redundancy serves us well, Ambassador," she replied. "Our armor has proven reliable in many conflicts. Reliable." Dexilora's laughter was like the chittering of insects. "My dear Commander, your warriors lumber about like ancient siege engines. In modern warfare, speed and agility are everything. Energy shields deflect attacks without adding weight. Your soldiers would be dead before they could even turn around to face an enemy." Other aliens were watching now, some clearly agreeing with the Vacrine ambassador. One delegate, resembling a crystalline bird, spoke up. "Our shields can deflect plasma fire, particle beams, even kinetic projectiles. They adapt in microseconds to different threat types. What can physical armor do that energy shields cannot?" Webb wanted to speak. Chun could sense it, but she raised a hand slightly, a signal for the Marines to remain silent. "Our armor serves multiple purposes," she said calmly. "Protection, strength enhancement, environmental sealing, medical monitoring. It is a complete system, not just a defense mechanism. A complete system that makes your warriors slow and vulnerable," Dexilor countered. "But perhaps this is the best humans can achieve. After all, you are new to galactic society. In time, perhaps you will learn to build proper defensive technology." The condescension in the ambassador's tone was unmistakable, and Chun saw several other delegates nodding in agreement. The message was clear. Humanity was being viewed as primitive, backward, stuck in an earlier stage of technological development. Session continued with formal presentations and diplomatic protocols, but the damage was done. Throughout the proceedings, Chun noticed aliens glancing at the human Marines and whispering among themselves. Some looked amused, others pitying, as if they were watching children play at being soldiers, and the session finally ended and the delegation returned to their quarters. Webb removed his helmet and looked at Chun. "Permission to speak freely, Commander?" he asked. "Granted," Chun replied, sitting down heavily in a chair. "They have no idea what they're talking about," Webb said, his voice tight with controlled anger. "These suits have saved my life more times than I can count. Shields fail, Commander. I've seen it happen. Power gets cut. Generators malfunction. Exotic particles disrupt the field, and when that shield goes down, there's nothing between you and whatever's trying to kill you." Chun nodded slowly. "I know, Sergeant," she said. "But they don't. They've built their entire military doctrine around energy shields, and they've been successful. They have no reason to believe that heavy armor has any value, and maybe we should show them," Webb suggested. "Maybe we will," Chun replied, looking out the viewport at the vast station beyond. Maybe we will. What neither of them knew was that within 48 hours, the Vacrine ambassador's words would come back to haunt him, and the entire galactic coalition would learn a harsh lesson about the value of human engineering. Sometimes the old way survived for a reason, and sometimes being called primitive was better than being called dead. The human quarters on Convergence Station were modest but comfortable, designed to accommodate species that breathed oxygen and lived in Earth-standard gravity. Sergeant Marcus Webb sat in the common area with his 5 Marines, their armor standing in charging racks along the wall like silent sentinels. The suits looked even more imposing in the dim light, their scarred and worn surfaces telling stories of battles past. "I don't get it," said Corporal Lisa Jiang, the youngest member of the team. "How can they think shields are better? What happens when the power fails?" "That's exactly the point," Webb replied, leaning back in his chair. "They don't think about power failure because their technology is so advanced that it rarely happens. To them, our concerns seem paranoid." Private Jackson, a big man from the North American continent, shook his head. "My grandfather fought in the resource wars," he said. He told me stories about soldiers who relied on powered systems that failed when they needed them most. That's why our armor has mechanical backups for everything. You can lose power completely and still move, still fight. Webb nodded, remembering his own training. Every Marine learned the history of human armor development, learned why it was built the way it was. It wasn't ignorance or primitive thinking. It was hard-won wisdom purchased with blood. The story began centuries ago, back when humanity was still confined to Earth. Wars had raged across the planet, and military technology had evolved through brutal trial and error. Early powered armor had been revolutionary, but it had a fatal flaw. When the power systems were damaged or ran out of energy, the soldiers inside became trapped in several hundred pounds of dead weight, unable to move, unable to defend themselves. Waiting to die, the solution had been elegant in its simplicity. Build the armor so it could function mechanically, even without power. Every joint had hydraulic systems for powered movement, but underneath were old-fashioned hinges and gears that could move through sheer muscle strength. It made the armor heavier, more complex, more expensive, but it also made it reliable. Then came the shield technology, developed during the early space expansion era. Humanity had been thrilled, thinking they had finally caught up to theoretical alien technology. Shields were amazing invisible barriers that could stop bullets, deflect energy weapons, even protect against radiation. For a brief period, military planners had considered abandoning heavy armor entirely. The Mars Rebellion had changed everything. Rebel forces had developed impulse weapons specifically designed to overload shield generators. In the first major battle, corporate security forces with state-of-the-art shields had been wiped out in minutes when their defenses failed catastrophically. The rebels, wearing older armor suits with shields as a secondary system, had survived, and OneWeb had been there, a young private in his first combat deployment. He remembered watching shields flicker and die, remembered the screams of men and women who suddenly found themselves defenseless. He also remembered that his armor, even with its shields down, had kept him alive. Bullets had dented it, plasma fire had scorched it, but it had held. He had walked away from that battle, and many others hadn't. The brass learned a hard lesson on Mars. Webb said aloud, bringing his attention back to the present. Never put all your faith in one system. Always have backups, always have redundancy. That's why our suits have shields now, but the shields are just the first layer. If they fail, we still have the armor. If the armor breaches, we have the emergency sealant systems. If those fail, we have the internal pressure suit. And if that fails, we have the emergency beacon and locator. Everything has a backup, and every backup has a backup. Jang looked at her armor suit with new appreciation. The aliens don't build like that? She asked. From what I've read in the briefings, no, Webb replied. Their technology is so reliable that redundancy seems wasteful. Why carry extra weight for systems you'll never need? That's their thinking, anyway. The door chimed and Commander Chun entered. With her was an alien that none of the Marines had seen before, a slender being with pale blue skin and large, expressive eyes. It moved gracefully, almost floating, and wore a simple silver bodysuit that shimmered with embedded technology. At ease, Chun said as the Marines started to stand. This is Kylara. She's a Synthari engineer, and she's requested permission to speak with you about your armor. I granted it, but you're free to decline. Kylara stepped forward, her movements tentative. I hope I am not intruding, she said, her voice soft and melodic. I witnessed the assembly today, heard what Ambassador Dexilor said about your armor. I confess I found myself curious rather than dismissive. Would you be willing to explain your design philosophy to me? Webb exchanged glances with his team, then nodded. What do you want to know? He asked. Kylara's eyes brightened. Everything, she replied. Your armor is unlike anything in the Coalition. It appears heavy, cumbersome, Yet your people clearly trust it. There must be reasons, good reasons, for building equipment this way. For the next hour, Webb and his Marines walked Kilara through every aspect of their armor. They explained the layered construction, the ablative outer shell that vaporized under extreme heat to dissipate energy, the ceramic composite plates that shattered to absorb kinetic impacts, the titanium alloy frame that maintained structural integrity even when everything else failed. They demonstrated the mechanical backup systems, showing how the suits could still move even when completely unpowered. They explained the medical monitoring systems, the built-in trauma kits, the way the armor could inject medications or seal wounds automatically. They showed her the redundant power cells, the emergency protocols, the multiple communication systems. Kilara listened intently, asking questions that revealed a sharp technical mind. "So you design for failure," she said finally. "You assume every system will eventually break, and you plan for it." "Exactly," Webb confirmed. "We call it defensive pessimism. Hope for the best, plan for the worst." "Fascinating," Kilara said. "In the Coalition, we design for success. We build systems that are so advanced, so efficient, that failure becomes statistically improbable. But when failure does occur, it is often catastrophic because we have not planned for it." She paused, her expression troubled. "I should tell you something," she continued. "There are tensions in the Coalition that most delegates do not speak of openly. The Vacrine Empire has been expanding aggressively, claiming systems near their borders. Some fear they are preparing for war. If conflict comes, many species will rely entirely on their shields and light armor. They have forgotten how to build for survival." Chun, who had been listening quietly, leaned forward. "Are you saying we should be worried?" she asked. "I'm saying you should be prepared," Kilara replied. "The Vacrine are powerful, and they are arrogant. They believe their weapons and defenses are unmatched. They may seek to test that belief. Let them come," Jackson muttered, then caught himself. "Sorry, Commander." Chun shook her head slightly. "No apology necessary, Private," she said. "But Kilara, why are you telling us this? You could be accused of disloyalty." Kilara's expression was sad. "Because I believe the Coalition has grown complacent," she said. "We have had peace for so long that we have forgotten the cost of war. Perhaps your people, with your heavy armor and your defensive thinking, remember what we have forgotten. Perhaps that is why you survived to reach the stars when so many species destroy themselves before they leave their home worlds." She stood to leave, then turned back. "One more thing," she said. "The Vacrine's most powerful weapon is the plasma lance. It has never been used against infantry, only against ships. They say it can vaporize any shield in a single shot. I hope you never face it, but if you do, I hope your armor is as good as you believe it is." After Kilara left, the Marines sat in silence for a long moment. Finally, Jang spoke. "Do you think she's right, Sergeant? Do you think there's going to be trouble?" Webb looked at his armor, its familiar bulk a source of comfort rather than embarrassment. "I think we should be ready," he said. Just like always, none of them knew how soon that readiness would be tested. The Coalition Assembly was in full session when the first alarms began to sound. Commander Chun was listening to a trade proposal from the Crystalline Concord when the lights flickered and emergency sirens wailed through the massive chamber. Around her, delegates rose from their seats in confusion. Multiple languages creating a babel of worried voices. "Attention all station personnel," a mechanical voice announced through the station speakers. "This is a security emergency. Hostile forces have breached sectors 7 through 12. All delegates are to remain in the assembly hall under protective custody." Chun was on her feet immediately, her hand moving to the communicator at her belt. "Webb, report," she said sharply. The sergeant's voice came back instantly, calm despite the situation. We're in position at the assembly hall entrance, Commander. Something's wrong with station security. Their shields are flickering. Looks like some kind of coordinated disruption. Through the chamber's main entrance, Chun could see chaos erupting in the corridors beyond. Station security forces were taking defensive positions, their energy shields glowing bright blue as they activated. But even as she watched, one of the shields suddenly flared brilliant white and collapsed. The security officer behind it thrown backwards by some unseen force. All Marines, full defensive posture, Chun ordered. Protect the delegates. Rules of engagement are weapons-free on any hostile targets. The 6 human Marines moved with practiced efficiency, spreading out across the wide entrance to the assembly hall. Their heavy armor made them impossible to miss, and several alien delegates backed away nervously as the humans took position. Sergeant Webb stood in the center, his rifle raised, scanning the corridor through his helmet's enhanced vision systems. "Commander, we've got movement," Private Jackson reported. "Multiple hostiles. Looks like Vacrine soldiers, but different insignia, not regular coalition forces." Chun's blood ran cold. If these were rogue Vacrine, this wasn't just an attack, it was a coup attempt. The implications were staggering, but there was no time to think about politics now. Survival came first. The first hostile Vacrine appeared at the end of the corridor, moving fast on their multiple legs. They carried weapons that looked like long spears with glowing tips, plasma lances. Chun realized with shock. Those were ship-to-ship weapons, never meant to be used against infantry. The destructive power would be enormous incoming. Webb shouted, and the Marines opened fire. The sound of human weapons was jarring in the refined atmosphere of the station loud. Aggressive projectile weapons that seemed crude compared to the silent energy weapons of most coalition species. But crude or not, they were effective. The first Vacrine soldier went down, its armor cracking under the sustained fire. But there were more, many more. A dozen Vacrine soldiers burst into the corridor, and one of them leveled its plasma lance at the station security forces still struggling to reorganize. There was a sound like thunder compressed into a single instant, and a beam of superheated plasma erupted from the lance. Station security officer's shield held for perhaps 1/10 of a second before it overloaded catastrophically. The plasma punched through and vaporized everything in its path. The officer, 2 others behind him, and part of the corridor wall itself. The remaining security forces broke and ran, their confidence in their shields shattered along with the defensive line. "Fall back to the assembly hall." Someone was screaming. "They have plasma lances. We can't hold." But the human Marines didn't fall back. They couldn't, not with hundreds of unarmed delegates behind them. Webb made the calculation instantly. If they retreated, the Vacrine would sweep into the hall and slaughter everyone. Their only chance was to hold this corridor. Jackson, suppressing fire," Webb ordered. "Make them keep their heads down. Torres, Davis, angle left and right. Give us overlapping fields of fire. Martinez, stay mobile and watch our flanks." The Marines shifted smoothly into defensive formation, using their armor's strength to move debris and create improvised cover. Their weapons fired in controlled bursts, forcing the Vacrine to take cover and move cautiously. It wasn't enough to stop them, but it slowed them down behind them in the assembly hall. Delegates from dozens of species watched in stunned silence. Many had never seen ground combat before, had never witnessed violence more serious than political debates. Now they were watching 6 humans in primitive armor standing between them, and certain Death Ambassador Dexilor watched from his seat, his earlier arrogance replaced by dawning horror. These weren't regular Vacrine soldiers. They were from a radical faction that sought to overthrow the coalition government through force. And they had brought weapons designed to destroy starships. Weapons that could punch through any shield in existence. "They're insane," Dexilor muttered. Using plasma lances on a space station? They'll breach the hull. We'll all die. They don't care, Kylara said quietly beside him. She had moved to his section when the attack began. They want to destroy the coalition, and they're willing to die doing it, in the corridor. The situation was deteriorating rapidly. More Vakrian soldiers were arriving, and they were starting to coordinate their attacks. Two of them provided suppressing fire while a third aimed its plasma lance at the human position. Incoming lance fire. Webb shouted, "Brace!" The plasma lance discharged with that same terrible sound, and the beam tore through the corridor like a spear of concentrated starfire. It hit the debris barricade the Marines had erected, vaporizing it instantly. But more importantly, it was heading straight for Sergeant Marcus. Webb. Time seemed to slow as Webb saw death coming for him. The plasma beam was impossibly bright, impossibly hot. His shield activated automatically, flaring to maximum power. For a fraction of a second it held, deflecting some of the energy. Then it overloaded and collapsed, exactly as Webb had always known it would. But Webb had never relied on his shield alone. That was why human armor was built the way it was. The plasma beam hit him directly in the center of his chest plate at the exact moment his shield failed. The outer layer of his armor was ablative composite, designed to vaporize and carry heat away. It did exactly that, burning away in an instant, but dissipating a huge amount of energy in the process. Beneath, there was a layer of ceramic composite, which shattered on impact, breaking into millions of fragments that each absorbed and scattered a bit more of the plasma's energy. Beneath that was a thermal gel layer that flash-boiled, creating a momentary cushion of vapor that spread the force of impact, and beneath all of that was the titanium alloy frame, the last line of defense. It was scorched black by the heat, deformed by the impact, but it held. The force of the blast threw Webb backwards, slamming him against the wall hard enough to crack the station's metal. Paneling every delegate in the assembly hall saw it happen. They saw the plasma lance hit the human sergeant, saw the explosion of vaporized armor and superheated air. They saw him fly backwards and slam into the wall, and they waited for him to fall down dead, because nothing could survive a direct hit from a plasma lance. "Webb!" Chun's voice was sharp with fear. "Webb, respond!" For a moment there was only silence. Smoke drifted through the corridor, and the other Marines had paused in their firing, staring at where their sergeant had fallen. Then, impossibly, movement. Webb pushed himself away from the wall and stood up. His armor was a ruin. The chest plate was scorched black. Deep gouges carved through multiple layers, smoke rising from the damaged systems. His shield generator was completely destroyed, sparking and dead. Several hydraulic lines had ruptured, leaking fluid. The armor's power output was down to 30%, but Sergeant Marcus Webb was alive. And he was standing, and his rifle was still in his hands. "I'm okay," Webb said. And his voice was steady despite the pain. His ribs felt like they were on fire, and he was pretty sure something was cracked or broken. The armor's medical system was already injecting painkillers and monitoring his vitals. Armor held. Still in the fight. The corridor fell silent. Even the attacking Vakrian soldiers had stopped firing, staring in disbelief at the human who should have been atomized. In the assembly hall, hundreds of aliens stood frozen, trying to process what they had just witnessed. Ambassador Dexai Lore rose slowly from his seat, his mandibles hanging open. "That's impossible," he whispered. "No one survives a direct plasma lance hit. No one." But Webb had survived, and the reason was written in the smoking ruin of his armor, layer after layer of redundant protection, each designed to fail in a specific way, each buying microseconds of survival time. And microseconds had been enough. "Marines, resume fire!" Webb ordered, bringing his rifle up despite the damage to his armor systems. "We hold this line." The battle resumed with renewed fury, but something had changed. The other Marines fought with desperate courage, knowing their sergeant had faced death and won. The Valkyrian attackers fought with sudden uncertainty, their confidence shaken by the impossible survival they had witnessed. And in the assembly hall, delegates from across the galaxy began to understand that humanity's primitive armor might not be so primitive after all. The moment stretched like elastic before snapping back to violent reality. Sergeant Webb stood in the corridor with smoke rising from his ruined armor, and the sight of him alive and combat-ready sent a shock wave through everyone watching. The impossible had become real, and suddenly the entire tactical situation shifted. Did that human just tank a plasma lance? One of the crystalline delegates asked, its voice filled with awe. Impossible. Another replied, but there was doubt in the words now. Nothing survives that. Nothing. But Webb had survived, and now he was moving forward rather than back. His armor's servos whined in protest, damaged but still functional. The mechanical backup systems kicked in where the powered ones had failed, and he advanced step by heavy step toward the enemy position. With me, Webb called to his Marines. Push them back. They're scared now. Use it. The other 5 Marines responded instantly, moving from defensive positions to aggressive assault. Corporal Zhang's armor was still pristine, her shields holding strong, as she used them to provide mobile cover as they advanced. Private Jackson's massive frame shouldered through debris like it wasn't there. His armor's strength enhancement making him an unstoppable force, the Valkyrian soldiers. Elite troops who had trained for years and believed themselves invincible found themselves retreating. Their plasma lances were devastating weapons, true, but they were slow to recharge after each shot. Against an enemy that refused to die when hit, that slowness became a fatal weakness. Concentrate fire. The Valkyrian commander ordered, but his soldiers' discipline was cracking. They had seen their ultimate weapon fail, had watched a primitive human in primitive armor survive what should have killed him. Doubt was a poison that spread fast in combat. Webb fired in short, controlled bursts as he advanced. His armor's targeting system was damaged, so he aimed manually, relying on training and instinct. Bullets struck Valkyrian soldiers, punching through their light armor and shields. The aliens had built their entire military doctrine around speed and energy deflection, and they had forgotten how to defend against simple kinetic projectiles behind the human line. Station security forces were recovering from their panic. A Centauri officer, watching the Marines advance, made a decision. Reform on the humans. She ordered, use their armor as cover. Combine our firepower. It was a testament to the Marines' performance that alien soldiers were willing to trust them now. What had seemed like primitive equipment minutes ago now looked like salvation. Station security forces moved up behind the Marines, using the human armor as mobile fortifications, adding their energy weapons. To the assault, the Valkyrian raiders found themselves facing a hybrid force that combined the best of both approaches, human durability and staying power with alien firepower and energy weapons. It was a combination they had no defense against. In the assembly hall, Commander Chun watched the battle unfold with clinical precision, already thinking 3 steps ahead. Kalara, she called to the Centauri engineer. Can you access the station's security network? We need to know how many hostiles we're facing and where they are. Kalara moved quickly to a control panel, her fingers dancing across holographic interfaces. The raiders control sectors 7 through 12, she reported. But they're fragmented now. Your Marines' defense has prevented them from consolidating. They expected to sweep through the station in minutes. How many in total? Chun asked. Perhaps 300 combat troops, Kalara replied. Against a station garrison of 5,000. But the garrison is scattered and disorganized. Most of their shields failed in the initial attack. Some kind of disruption pulse. Chun nodded grimly. The raiders had planned well, crippling the station's energy shield-dependent defenses before attacking. They just hadn't planned on encountering humans whose armor didn't rely on energy shields in the corridor. Webb and his team had pushed the Valkyrie back to a major intersection. The enemy was regrouping, preparing for another assault. Webb took the moment to check his armor status through his heads-up display. The readout was not encouraging power at 28%. 3 hydraulic lines ruptured. Shield generator destroyed. Chestplate compromised. Multiple system warnings, but the armor was still holding together. Still protecting him, still letting him fight. That was all that mattered, Sergeant Webb. A voice came over the command channel. It was Ambassador HFY. This is madness. You must fall back. Your armor is damaged. You cannot survive another hit. With respect, Ambassador, Webb replied, checking his ammunition. My armor is damaged but functional. And I've survived 1 plasma lance already. I figure that puts me ahead of the game. There was a pause then. How? How did you survive? The plasma lance is our most powerful infantry weapon. It should have killed you instantly. Layers, Webb said simply. My armor has 8 distinct layers, each designed to fail in a specific way. The ablative outer shell vaporized and carried heat away. The ceramic plates shattered and absorbed kinetic energy. The thermal gel boiled and spread the impact force. The structural frame held everything together. By the time the plasma got to me, it had lost 90% of its energy. Redundancy, HFY breathed. You planned for every system to fail. Exactly, Webb confirmed. Hope for the best, plan for the worst. Before HFY could respond, the Valkyrie launched their next attack. This time they came from multiple directions simultaneously, trying to overwhelm the human position through sheer numbers. But the Marines had used a brief respite to improve their position, and now they had station security backing them up. The battle became a close-quarters nightmare. Valkyrie soldiers swarmed through the intersection, their natural speed and agility on full display. But the Marines held firm, their armor allowing them to absorb hits that would have killed lighter troops. When a Valkyrie blade sliced across Zhang's arm, it scored the armor but didn't penetrate. When another soldier tackled Jackson, the big man simply shrugged it off and kept firing. Webb moved through the chaos like a wounded bear, slow but inexorable. Impossible to stop. His damaged armor sparked and groaned, but the mechanical systems kept working. He blocked a plasma lance shot with his own body, the beam hitting his shoulder and burning through the already compromised armor. The pain was intense, but the armor's medical system compensated, and he stayed on his feet. Target the lance weapons. Chun ordered over the command channel. Without them, they're no more dangerous than any other light infantry. The Marines shifted their priority, and within minutes, every Valkyrie soldier carrying a plasma lance was down. The Raiders had brought 20 of the massive weapons, and all 20 were now destroyed or captured. Without their most powerful tool, the attack stalled. That was when reinforcements arrived, not for the Raiders, but for the defenders. Station security forces from other sectors had finally organized and were converging on the battle. The Valkyrie found themselves surrounded, trapped between the human Marines at the front and overwhelming numbers at the rear. The Raider commander, seeing the situation was hopeless, made a final desperate decision. All units, fall back to Docking Bay 7, he ordered. We'll escape and regroup. But Commander Chun had anticipated this. Webb, can you pursue? She asked. Webb assessed his condition quickly. His armor was barely holding together, his body was bruised and battered, and he'd been in combat for nearly an hour. Affirmative, he said. Marines, with me. We cut off their escape route. What followed was a running battle through the station's corridors. The Valkyrie were fast, but the Marines were relentless. Every time the Raiders tried to make a stand, human armor proved too tough to break through quickly. Every time they tried to flee, human determination kept them in sight, at Docking Bay 7. The raiders found their escape ships destroyed. Chun had ordered station defense forces to target them as soon as the battle began. Trapped, outnumbered, and facing an enemy that refused to die, the Valkyrian commander finally surrendered when the smoke cleared and the prisoners were secured. Webb allowed himself to sit down against a wall. His armor's medical system was reporting multiple injuries: 3 cracked ribs, a dislocated shoulder, first-degree burns on his left side, and extensive bruising. But he was alive, and so were all his Marine stores, whose armor had taken the second most damage, knelt beside him. "You okay, Sarge?" she asked. Webb managed a laugh that turned into a wince. "I've been better," he admitted. "But I've been worse too." "Armor did its job." "Damn right it did," Jackson said, his voice full of pride. "Saw you take that lance hit. Thought you were done for. Then you just stood back up like it was nothing." "Wasn't nothing," Webb corrected. "Hurt like hell. But that's what the armor's for, to take the hits so we don't have to." "Well, to take most of the hits anyway." Commander Chun arrived with medical teams and station security. "Stand down, Marines," she ordered gently. "You've done more than enough. Let the medics check you out." As they worked on his injuries, Webb looked at his ruined armor. The chest plate would need to be completely replaced, along with dozens of other components. It would take days of work to restore the suit to combat-ready status. But it had kept him alive through a direct hit from a weapon designed to destroy starships, and that made it worth every pound of extra weight, every redundant system, every primitive design choice. 3 days after the attack, Sergeant Marcus Webb sat in the station's medical bay while technicians worked on his armor. His own injuries had been treated, the ribs wrapped, the shoulder reset, the burns covered with regenerative gel, and now he watched as engineers from half a dozen species examined his damaged suit with fascination. "Remarkable," said a crystalline engineer, running sensor equipment over the scorched chest plate. 8 distinct layers, each with a different failure mode. The plasma lance's energy was dissipated incrementally rather than all at once. "It's brilliant in its simplicity." A Valkyrian military analyst stood beside the engineer, his mandibles clicking softly as he studied the damage. "We designed the plasma lance to overwhelm shields through raw power," he said. "A single catastrophic failure that would kill instantly. We never considered an enemy who would accept progressive failure as a defensive strategy. That's because your shields either work or they don't," Webb replied from his seat. "No middle ground. Our armor degrades gradually, buying us time to survive, to adapt, to keep fighting." Kylar was there too, examining the armor's mechanical backup systems. "I've been studying your design philosophy," she said. "You build for the worst-case scenario. You assume that everything will eventually break, and you plan accordingly. It's the opposite of how we've been designing for thousands of years." "Not the opposite," Webb corrected gently. "Just different. Your way works great when it works. Our way works okay, even when it fails. Both approaches have value." The medical bay's door opened and Commander Chen entered, followed by Ambassador Thessilor. The Valkyrian diplomat had spent the past 3 days in intense discussions with coalition leadership, and he looked tired but determined. "Sergeant Webb," Thessilor said formally. "May I speak with you?" Webb nodded, and the ambassador approached. For a long moment, he simply looked at the damaged armor, at the physical evidence of survival against impossible odds. "I have been a soldier for 40 years, Thessilor began. "I have fought in 7 campaigns, commanded fleets in 3 major wars. I believed I understood combat, understood warfare, understood what it meant to be a warrior. But watching you stand up after taking a direct plasma lance hit, that showed me I understood nothing." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "In Valkyrian culture, we value speed, elegance, precision. We build weapons that kill instantly, and defenses that work perfectly or not at all. There is no room for gradual failure, no acceptance of damage. To us, being wounded is the same as being dead. But humans are different. Webb said, understanding. Yes, Dexilor agreed. Humans accept that they will be wounded, accept that their equipment will be damaged, and they build everything to keep functioning anyway. It's a mindset born of fragility. Your species evolved on a harsh world, facing constant threats, surviving by being too stubborn to die. Webb smiled at that. Too stubborn to die. I like that. It should be our motto. Over the following days, the story of the battle spread throughout the coalition. The tale of 6 human Marines holding off 300 elite raiders became legend. Security footage was analyzed in military academies. Tactics manuals were revised. Armor designs were reconsidered. The Galactic Coalition convened an emergency session to address both the raid and its implications. Commander Chun stood before the assembly, no longer relegated to the lower tiers, but given a place of honor at the center platform. The attack on Convergence Station has revealed weaknesses in our collective security, the coalition speaker announced. We have grown complacent, relying too heavily on single-point defense systems. The Vakrine raiders disabled our shields and nearly succeeded in their coup. Only the presence of the human delegation prevented catastrophe. There were murmurs of agreement throughout the chamber. Delegates who had mocked human armor 3 days ago now looked at the 6 Marines with respect and, in some cases, envy. Therefore, the speaker continued, the Coalition Council has voted unanimously to grant humanity full membership status, effective immediately. Furthermore, we invite the United Earth government to participate in a joint military technology exchange program. Chun stood and bowed. On behalf of Earth, I accept this honor, she said. We look forward to sharing our knowledge with the Coalition, just as we hope to learn from your advanced sciences. After the formal session ended, Chun found herself surrounded by delegates requesting private meetings. The Centauri wanted to discuss joint armor development. The Crystalline Concord sought to combine their energy shield technology with human redundancy principles. Even the Vakrine Empire requested consultations on defensive systems, but the most interesting proposal came from Kalara, who approached Chen with a formal transfer request. I wish to join the human delegation as a technical liaison, she said. If you will have me, why? Chun asked, though she thought she knew the answer. Because I've realized something, Kylara replied. The Coalition has been at peace for so long that we've forgotten how to survive adversity. We design for perfection, and when perfection fails, we have nothing to fall back on. Humans design for imperfection, for failure, for the worst possible scenario, and that means you're always prepared. Chun smiled. Welcome aboard, she said. We can use someone who understands both perspectives. In the weeks that followed, Convergence Station became a hub of unprecedented cooperation. Human engineers worked alongside alien scientists, combining technologies in ways neither had considered before. The results were remarkable. The first prototype hybrid armor combined human, mechanical redundancy with Centauri energy distribution systems. It was heavier than pure energy shields, but lighter than pure physical armor, with multiple layers of defense that complemented each other. When one system failed, others compensated. It was elegant and robust, sophisticated and reliable. The Vakrine military, humbled by their failure, requested the most extensive collaboration. We need to relearn what we've forgotten, their new ambassador explained. How to build systems that degrade gracefully rather than fail catastrophically. Webb was assigned as an advisor to the Vakrine Military Academy, teaching classes on defensive engineering and survival tactics. At first, the Vakrine cadets were skeptical, but after he demonstrated the armor's capabilities in a training exercise, including taking simulated plasma lance hits and continuing to fight skepticism, turned to eagerness. The key is accepting that you will be hit. Webb explained to a class of young Vacrine officers. Your shields will fail. Your armor will be damaged. You will be hurt. Once you accept that, you can start planning for it. And once you plan for it, you can survive it. One cadet raised a claw. But doesn't planning for failure make failure more likely? She asked. No, Webb replied. Planning for failure makes survival more likely. There's a difference. Hoping your shields never fail doesn't make them invincible. Preparing for when they fail does make you survivable. 6 months after the attack, Sergeant Webb stood in the armory of a new Joint Human Coalition military base, looking at the latest generation of hybrid armor. It incorporated the best of both approaches, energy shields for the first line of defense, backed by multiple layers of physical armor for redundancy, all supported by mechanical backup systems that required no power to function. It was heavier than pure shields, slower than pure energy systems, more complex than either approach alone, but it was also more reliable, more survivable, more effective. Field tests showed soldiers in hybrid armor could sustain 3 times as much damage before being incapacitated compared to shield-only systems. You started a revolution, Kylara told him as they examined the new armor. The entire coalition is rethinking its approach to defensive technology. Some species are calling it the human paradigm, designing for survival rather than perfection. Webb shrugged. We just shared what worked for us, he said. Earth taught us hard lessons. We paid for this knowledge with blood. If sharing it saves coalition lives, that's good enough for me. More than good enough, a voice said from behind them. They turned to find Ambassador Thexy Lore entering the armory. The Vacrine Empire has begun replacing our entire infantry armor system based on human principles. It will take years, but when we're done, our soldiers will be as hard to kill as yours. That's the idea, Webb agreed. Nobody should have to die because their equipment failed them. The final ceremony took place on Convergence Station exactly 1 year after the attack. The coalition erected a memorial to the station's security forces who had died defending against the raiders, and to honor the human Marines who had turned the tide. 6 statues were unveiled, depicting the Marines in their combat armor, standing in defensive formation, but the centerpiece of the memorial was a 7th statue larger than the others, showing Sergeant Marcus Webb at the moment after the plasma lance hit him, standing upright despite his ruined armor, rifle in hand, refusing to fall. The plaque beneath read, "Too stubborn to die, the human paradigm." Webb stood before his own statue, feeling awkward and honored in equal measure. I just did my job, he protested when reporters asked for comments. You did more than that, Commander Chung told him privately after the ceremony. You changed how an entire galaxy thinks about survival. Those aliens mocked our armor because it was heavy, because it was built for